drugs or from our textbook. In this chapter, we're going to depend on the strength of the drug that's available, and we'll see that it's usually found on the label of the drug container. One thing to keep in mind, especially if you have the same drug available in different strengths, is that we always want to administer the fewest number of tablets or capsules possible. If we look at our first example, it says the order is Cialis 20 milligrams by mouth prior to anticipated sexual activity. The medication is available in 3 strengths. We can see those different labels over on the right-hand side of the screen. Determine how you would administer this dose using the fewest number of available tablets. So if we focus on our 20 milligrams, we want to look for the tablet that's as close to 20 milligrams as possible without going over it. And it looks like we can use this green Cialis that's 20 milligrams. So we would give the patient 1 tablet of the 20 milligram strength Cialis. So sometimes it's nice and easy and we can just pick one. Let's look at another example. The prescriber orders Zoloft 75 milligrams by mouth twice a day. Read the drug label and determine how many tablets of this antipsychotic drug you would give the patient per dose. So if we look at this, the patient needs 75 milligrams. So I've got 75 milligrams is what I'm starting with. And that 75 milligrams is per 1 dose, because notice they're asking us what we're going to give to the patient per dose. Now, if we look at our drug label, it's 25 milligrams. So there's 25 milligrams in 1 tablet. We know it's a tablet because they tell us up in the problem and because it's on our drug label. If we cancel out, we're left with tablets per dose, which is exactly what they asked for. When we multiply straight across, we have 75 over 25, but we know we want to simplify that out by doing our division. So we know we're going to give 3 tablets per dose. Let's keep going. The antibiotic Zithromax is ordered to treat a patient who has a diagnosis of COPD. The order is Zithromax 500 milligrams by mouth as a single dose on day 1, followed by 250 milligrams once daily on days 2 through 5. How many milligrams will the patient receive by the completion of the prescription? So we want milligrams. And if we look, the good news is everything is in milligrams so far. The issue is that they're not giving the same amount to the patient every day. So let's focus on day 1 first. On day 1, they're telling us that we're giving 500 milligrams by mouth as a single dose. So on day 1, they're only getting 500 milligrams once. We don't have to do anything extra there. Now let's look at days 2 through 5. They're telling us that this patient is getting 250 milligrams still once daily on days 2 through 5. So if you're not sure how many days there are, because it is easy to make this mistake, write it out. We've got day 2, day 3, day 4, and day 5. So this patient is getting 250 milligrams once per day for 4 days. So we need to do that 250 times 4. If we do that, we discover that this patient is getting 1,000 milligrams on days 2 through 5. So if we need the total amount, we need to do the 500 milligrams from day 1 plus the 1,000 milligrams from days 2 through 5 to get 1,500 milligrams. Let's keep going. If we're looking at medication in liquid form, what we're doing is calculating the volume of the liquid that contains the prescribed drug dosage. And we can look at and see the different ways that we can actually give or measure the dose. If we look at this, the first thing we're being asked to do is identify the strength of the medication and calculate the dose indicated, just to be sure that we can find the information we'll need. So if we look at our strength, that's right on the label here. There's 25 milligrams per 5 milliliters. So in this case, our dose indicated is the same as the strength. So we can just say that our 25 milligrams is the same thing as our 5 milliliters. If we look at how to apply that to a problem, it says the patient is prescribed ibuprofen 400 milligrams by mouth every 4 hours as needed for pain. Determine how many milliliters you would administer to the patient. So if we look at this, they're getting 400 milligrams every 4 hours. Now notice they're just asking how many milliliters. They're not saying per day or anything along those lines. So when they don't specify, we assume that they're asking per dose. So I'm going to start with that 400 milligrams, and because that's what the patient is getting every 4 hours, we know that is per 1 dose. Now we want to find our milliliters. So to go from milligrams to milliliters, we need to use this dosage strength on the label. So I know I want my 100 milligrams to be diagonal from the other milligrams so they'll cancel out, and my 5 milliliters up top. If we multiply straight across, we end up with 2,000 milliliters over 100, and notice we still have that dose in our denominator. So we need to divide them out to simplify it down, and we're going to find that the patient gets 20 milliliters per every 1 dose. So we'd usually write that 20 milliliters per dose for our final answer. If we look at another example, it says the physician orders amoxicillin 500 milligrams by mouth every 12 hours. We're going to read the label and determine the number of milliliters we would administer in 1 day. So we're starting with our 500 milligrams. We're going to end in milliliters, and instead of 1 dose, we want 1 day. So I'm going to start out with that 500 milligrams per 1 dose. If we think about our strength here to get from milligrams to milliliters, we know there's 125 milligrams per 5 milliliters. So my milligrams cancel out. Now we need to think about this every 12 hours. If we're giving a dose every 12 hours, that means that they're getting 2 doses per day because there's 24 hours in 1 day. So I can multiply and say there's 2 doses in 1 day. So my doses cancel out, and I'm just left with milliliters per day. So I'm going to multiply straight across like I usually do. If I do that, I end up with 5,000 milliliters over 125 days. But we don't care about 125 days, we care about 1 day. So we're going to divide out and find that there's 40 milliliters per day. Now, if you're uncomfortable figuring out in your head how many doses are per day, we could set up a very similar problem, but instead of saying 1 dose, we would say that the patient gets 500 milligrams every 12 hours. We would still use that drug label to get from milligrams to milliliters, but because they were asking us 1 day, we could say that there's 24 hours in 1 day, and our hours would still cancel out. Now when we multiply straight across, our numbers are going to look slightly different. We'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 with 5 zeros after it. And we need to do our 12 times 125, which gives us 1,500. When we do that division, we do, give me 1 second, 1, 2, 3. Yep, we do get our same answer of 40 milliliters per day. I apologize. I knew something was wrong here. There's only 4 zeros after that. There we go. Okay. The other thing we need to look at is milliequivalents. Now, milliequivalents will always be given to us directly in a drug order or a drug label. You need to be careful not to confuse them with milligrams. Our abbreviation is MEQ, and it measures the number of grams of equivalent weight of a drug contained in 1 milliliter of normal saline. So we'll see this with some specific drugs, normally sodium bicarbonate, sodium chloride, or potassium chloride. So if we look at this, it says our order is potassium chloride, 60 milliequivalents by mouth daily in 3 divided doses. How many tablets would you administer? One thing we want to be careful of is that we always want to calculate 1 dose first. Sometimes if we try to calculate it by day and then divide it out, we'll end up with something that we have to round that could cause some errors. So we always want 1 dose first. If we look, we've got 60 milliequivalents by mouth daily divided in 3 doses. So I'm going to take my 60 milliequivalents and I'm going to divide it by 3. So that gives us that we're going to give the patient 20 milliequivalents per dose because they gave us the daily in 3 divided doses. Now we're going to look at converting that to tablets. So if we want our 20 milliequivalents per 1 dose, if we look here, they tell us the strength. There's 20 milliequivalents in every 1 tablet. So when we multiply, our milliequivalents cancel out. And we know that we're going to give 20 tablets in 20 doses, which is the same thing when we divide out as 1 tablet per dose. Now it is a little unclear if they're asking us per dose or per day. So notice it says how many tablets would you administer. So that's asking us per dose, right? We're not going to shove 3 tablets down the patient's mouth all at one time. So we're going to administer 1 tablet per dose. Okay. Now, we've seen when we're doing our dimensional analysis that sometimes we need to do more than 1 step. So we're going to use our dimensional analysis for some of the following problems. They ask us how many 300 milligram of this drug tablets contain 0.6 grams of the drug. So if we look at this, how many tablets is what they're really asking us for. So we need to end in tablets. And they're giving us 2 pieces of information. They're giving us essentially from the drug label the strength of 300 milligrams. And they're giving us that we want to know how many tablets contain the 0.6 grams. So that's where we're actually going to start. So I'm going to start with my 0.6 grams. Now notice our drug strength is milligrams. So I'm going to say in 1 gram, there's 1,000 milligrams. And then I'm going to use the drug strength to say that there's 300 milligrams in 1 tablet. When I multiply straight across, my 0.6 times 1,000 gives me 600. 1 times my 300 gives me 300. And when I divide out, I know that gives me 2. The only units that's left is tablets. So I know that 2 tablets contain 0.6 of a gram of the drug. If we look at another one, they give us an order of a drug, 0.1 milligrams by mouth twice a day. We want to know how many tablets should be given to the patient in one day. So here they specify the time period. So if we look at what's going on, we're starting out with our 0.1 milligrams. And if we think about it, that's 1 dose. That BID is telling us that the patient is getting 2 doses for every 1 day. Now we need to worry about getting to the tablets. So if we look, the measurement on this tablet is that it's 50 micrograms. So I need to say that in 1 milligram, there's 1,000 micrograms. Then I can say that there's 50 micrograms in 1 tablet. Now I'm going to double check. My milligrams cancel out. My micrograms cancel out. So I'm just left with tablets per day. When I multiply straight across the top, I end up with 200. And in the denominator, I have 50. When I divide them out, I end up with 4. And I know my units up top are tablets, in the bottom are days, so I know this patient gets 4 tablets per day.